Welcome to another episode of the Tower 26B Race Raid Podcast. I'm Joe Mitzke here once again with another episode. Coach Jerry Rodriguez, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you? What's
Hang on,
going
my
on?
speaker came out. I'm gonna say that again. Jerry, I can hear you now. You there?
I'm here. All
Look at
good.
that.
All
Look
good
at
my
that.
end.
Hiccups left and right. You only have one port open. Andy Donaldson's here. It's 5 a.m. there. He's been up since 2. Andy Blow's got a storm in the background. We got a studio on Zoom full of people. I'm knocking my earmuffs out here. What else is gonna happen in this show?
Check this out. I am sitting at 7,000 feet right now and went and took a little swim just now, Jim, and I felt I had like a half a lung.
Well, you know what? I think you just got to move up there. Where are you at right now?
We're up in Park City.
Park City, Utah.
Utah.
What are you up there doing? Some skiing, snowboarding? I know that. I know
Well, my
you're
wife's family got a little family vacay
you're the adventure sport expert in addition to open water swimmer. So I'm excited to hear about this. Tell me about it.
up here.
Yeah. How you
No,
cutting
it's great.
cutting the
I had a
slopes?
great opportunity yesterday to meet a nice little hour-long meeting with Max Tester, Dr. Max. So we're gonna
Wow,
get
that's
some
bringing
together
it
and
back. Andy Blow, Max Testa. Have you heard that name in a while?
Not for a while, no. I have. I've heard the man before.
Well, bringing it over to you, Andy Blow, CEO of Precision Fuel and Hydration. You've been on our 2 p.m. team call before, and I don't think you've ever been on the podcast. Is that right? Have you been on the airwaves yet?
No, I have not.
Let me tell you something. We are streamed to millions worldwide. So just don't get nervous here talking to all of our fans. All right. Just hope that you don't, just don't say the wrong thing.
I'll try and keep my hand steady.
Where are you at right now? Where are you located?
Christchurch in Dorset on the south coast of the UK, much closer to sea level than Jerry is.
Yeah. I think a wave might pummel your spot right there with the storm I hear in the background.
Yeah,
But
it's going off here. It would not. I'm just near the coast, and this would not be a day for open water swimming. This would be windsurfing, kiteboarding, definitely not swimming.
well, that's a leading statement because here's the deal, Jared. I was talking about Andy about coming on the show for a while, just getting the timing right between all different time zones was tough to do. And I was talking to him, let's get you on, let's this and that. It wasn't working out. And finally we figured out a time and he said, you know what? I'm gonna bring Andy Donaldson on. And I was like, you know what we should do? We should bring Andy Blow, the CEO of Precision Hydration. He should be our new booking agent because he brought on our other guest, Andy Donaldson. Andy, welcome to the show. You're muted. Let's unmute you. Unmute there, Andy.
It's funny that after 4 years of Zoom, still haven't figured out how to use this thing. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here and chat with all you guys.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about your relationship and how you guys know each other, but just a little about Andy real quick. He's a Scot. You're from Scotland. You're an Australian marathon swimmer. You're a 3-time world record holder with records, including the fastest time to complete the Ocean's 7, which you can tell us about shortly. The fastest swim across the Cook Strait. You're also the man of the year and the performance of the year in the World Open Water Swimming Association, which I don't know if you know, but Jerry Rodriguez is a pretty big deal in Wowza.
Oh, as I understand, he was one of the co-founders, wasn't he? So, no, Jerry's a big deal in ultramarathon swimming in general. And yeah, I might be hitting you up for a bit of advice for a swim that I have planned later on in the year, Jerry.
I've done way more swimming than I've ever put together, my friend. So
hey, everything's on the table here. That's why we're here, to learn and to share. So bounce it off Jerry throughout the course of this conversation. And the rest of us will be flies on the wall and just taking it all in. But it's exciting to have you here. Andy Blow, how are you guys hooked up? How do you know each other? And how did you become so ingrained with Andy Donaldson that you can get him on the show and then earn yourself a new job as our booking agent here at the Tower 26 podcast?
So that's one of those stories which started off badly because I think Andy got in touch with us a couple of years ago, and somehow, I don't know how this happened, we totally ignored him. He was prepping, or he was doing the Ocean 7 record. He was using some of our gels, some of our products, and he wrote to us and told us about what he was doing. Somehow this fell through the cracks, which is, if you know, our organization is not in character in any way, but unperturbed, Andy cracked on and used our products for the for his swims, for the Ocean 7 swims, particularly the gels. And then we heard about it again retrospectively and got in touch because we saw what an amazing, athletic accomplishment that was. We as a company, as you guys know, really embedded in triathlon. We work with a load of triathletes. We working with an increasing amount of cyclists, ultra runners, but marathon swimming and ultra swimming is an area that we're fascinated by because fueling for ocean swimming and marathon swimming in particular presents so many challenges, kind of logistical challenges in understanding the physiology, because even like looking at things like sweat loss in the water is so difficult to know how much to hydrate with. So we got in touch with Andy and said we'd love to learn about how he used our products during the ocean swims, to see if he wanted to work a bit more closely with us. And then a great coincidence came along that Andy's becoming an ambassador, and we're a sponsorship partner for an event called Ultra Swim 33.3, which is a 4-day 33.3 kilometer swim event in numerous locations at the moment around Europe. And so all of these things came together. And so our sports science team have started working with Andy to kind of unpick his nutrition plans and understand what he's doing so we can learn from that. And then in the future, hopefully we can add a bit more value to him and help him, keep breaking records as he ups the ante with some of these challenges.
Well, I think you just made so many points about you guys as precision, fuel, and hydration. If there's no sponsorship or anything between us, the reason that I reached out to you last year and we made contact and we started talking, we had our 2 p.m. team call, is number one, I used your products and I was like, wow, coming off of using pretty much everything on the planet, using your products there's never been the type of effect on my performance as when I've used the pH 1500 or your gels, you just have made a really quality product that actually gets into the system quick and does good work and allows you to maximize your performance because the nutrition is there because you've created such a quality product. So that's how we've made this relationship. I reached out but also what you're saying there is how you want to get into Andy Donaldson's background and get into the science behind his performance, because if you guys do go to the Precision Hydration site, you look at all these different case studies they have on all these different endurance athletes, all these different performances that athletes have had with products that they've used with your products, all these different research, the company has done that's led to good and bad performances, and you put all that into your R&D, which leads to the products and the success that athletes are having with the products. So I'm just saying, you're not just throwing sugar in water, shaking up and saying, here, take this. You've done a ton of research, and because of that, it's leading to some amazing performances. If I would have had your product 10 years ago, my whole career would be different. I mean, I would be at the Olympics the last 16 years straight, every 4 years for the last 16 years straight if I had precision. Jerry agrees. He knows in 2009 when I started swimming or 2008, he's like, wow, this guy's got potential, but he just doesn't have the right nutrition product.
It's nice of you to say, Jim.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all believe it.
Yeah, no, and we got the whole team on it, but it's like I said, that R&D and the way you look into the athletes' backgrounds is really, really important. And I don't think, there's enough of that in what people are formulating nowadays, and it's showing in your product.
I think on that point, it's really interesting because trying to learn, say, specifically about nutrition for open water marathon swimming, where a lot of us turn, if you're a scientist, you turn to the academic literature, first of all, to have a look at what's been studied. And you just look at the academic literature there and there's a big hole. There's not a lot of work, because up until relatively recently, long distance open water swimming was a niche, and it's still not a massive sport, but it's growing exponentially. There's so many more people participating. Andy came on and really kindly did an education session for our sports science team and our video call team the other day, and listening to that, he was making the point that he can probably expand on, that really even a few years ago when he started with Rottnest and some of the open water swims, the advice for nutrition was all over the map. It was like folklore. It was kind of handed down through generations of old coaches and old swimmers. I think, Andy, you said that you were told to stop halfway and eat a can of beans by someone, and then someone else told you should be doing something else. And there's all this like crazy stuff. So what we figured was that as a company, if we're going to actually really get into this space and help athletes by understanding it and developing products that work for swimmers, what we need to do is talk to some of the not just the best swimmers in the world, but some of the best swimmers who've also really trial and errored their way to the best programs. And Andy was top of that list.
Well, you have an old school swimmer up here in the upper left-hand corner. Jerry, when you would do your long swims, I mean, you swam around New York. What would you take anything? What was your fueling strategy as you did these longer swims?
You don't want my fueling strategy, none of you guys. And the reason is, on the day of that swim in 1988,
So what was the swim? Let's remind everybody if they don't know. What was
it was just the Manhattan Island swim, swimming around 28.5 miles around Manhattan. And we forgot our food, our nutrition. I went 28.5 miles with zero.
Wow.
So Andy Donaldson can relate to how many times can you bonk, right? Once. And then after that, it's just a matter of could you hang on? Could you actually finish? But Jim, to your point, I mean, it's the wild, wild west. It still is to some point regarding nutrition. The sport was very, very young. I mean, if you think about open water swimming, just got into the Olympics, right, in 2008. So, and that's a 10-kilometer race. And then these longer swims growing in quantity of events and quantity of participants. But this is all relatively new. In fact, when Steve Minatunis and I started Wowza back in, I forget what year it was, somewhere around 2010-ish, we held the first conference in Long Beach. And I started the open water swimming Facebook group, which now has like 50 or 60,000 people in it. And we're just getting, posts daily. I mean, probably 20 to 25 a day from just these groups all over the world that just get together to train. And there's just a lot of questions back and forth, some nutrition related, some training related, some meeting up related. So the sport and the activities is in its infancy. And I think it's super important for the Andes to come in and, get a good platform in place, especially obviously on this nutritional end of it, which is still, I think, in the Wild West frontier type situation.
Well, hopefully you guys are dialing that in, and we're figuring it out, because it sounds like you have the right people on the job. But Donaldson, when you look at the Ocean 7, first, can you tell us what the Ocean 7 is? Ocean 7, am I right in what I'm calling that? Ocean 7. Tell us what that is, and then how do you even go about training for that? And where's your mind go as you undertake the training for an accomplishment like that?
Yeah, so Jim, the Ocean 7 is a collection of channel swims actually put together by a guy that Jerry just mentioned, Stephen Munatones. He put together a list of what he felt were some of the world's most iconic and toughest channel swims around the world. There's 7 of them. They're spread around the place. Some are in the US, others are in the UK, so between England and France, Ireland to Scotland, which is a bit less warm up there, all the way through to places like the Cook Strait in New Zealand. It's a huge undertaking. A lot of people take many years to take it on and try complete it. I set out to try do it within a year, which was probably a little bit naive at the time, but I was able to do it. And yeah, it's a combination of things. I think obviously the physical training plays a part, but for me, I was out there, I was looking to try take a performance approach to it. And that, like every performance athlete, you're looking for the 1%ers. And that was really what brought me in touch with nutrition, seeking advice on this, because like Andy said, the marathon space, nutrition in that world is not quite, there's not really that much scientific backing or research done into it. It was a lot of word of mouth and suggestions, and everyone thinks their way is the right way, and people were prescribing how to do it when they probably weren't really qualified to do so. And so I originally just sort of looked for the patterns and advice and put together my own thing. But I knew for a challenge like this, where I was looking for records I'd need to recover and backup performances, I needed that professional advice. And luckily enough, the woman that was helping me were a woman called Christine Robson. She put me onto precision fuel and hydration, which is ultimately what led me down the path to meeting those guys. But yeah, lots of physical training, the nutrition, the recovery plays a big part. But these swims and what you guys would experience in your coaching, I'd imagine, particularly with the longer events, the mental aspect of the sport was really, really in this challenge was probably the biggest part of it all.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you watch NIAD. Jerry's good. You know, Jerry knows Diane and NIAD, and they made a big part of it is the mental side of things. I know Jerry wanted to get into something here, but that's something I want to definitely move into as we move through this conversation. But Jerry, what do you got?
No, please go ahead with this, and then I'll ask both the Andys.
Well, I mean, when you're in that long of a swim and you're just staring down for hour upon hour upon hour upon hour, where does your mind go? Like, what are you focusing on? How do you find that? How do you keep bringing it back to that flow without letting yourself go down this downward spiral and, you know, everything goes south?
Well, it depends what's happening out there. I mean, I think in an ideal world, you would be in this state of flow. We all talk about it. It's the sort of golden zone where the passage of time goes, you know, really, you don't feel it and everything's just working automatically. And that's what we train to do. We train our technique and whatnot so that it is automatic on the day when we perform. But a lot of these channels were, you know, they each presented their own unique challenges. You know, some were in freezing cold waters, so swimming from Ireland to Scotland, you know, people who have been there know it's cold enough on the land, never mind in the water.
And you're not allowed to wear no wetsuit, right? You're not allowed to wear wetsuits.
So, you know, that's freezing. You might get stung by a jellyfish. I know in Hawaii, a lot of people got stung badly by the Portuguese man of war. If the conditions are really rough and you're not making as much progress as you thought, or, you know, you're throwing up, if your nutrition's not on point, all of these stand to take you out of that state of flow. And that can be very difficult. And where your mind goes in those moments is really key, because in sport, you know, the body will keep going. It's the mind that gives up first. So you really need to have a resilient mindset and be robust in order to keep going and achieve your goals.
Steve Minatonis just texted me to ask you about your epic Maui swim, since you talked about the Portuguese man of war. Steve, he says hello. He wishes he could be on. He's in Honolulu right now, in fact, in a meeting.
Honolulu. Oh, fantastic. Well, in a nutshell, Epic Swim Maui is the first of a global expedition swim series that is going to be taking place in Maui later this year. 10 of the world's best ocean swimmers are coming to the island to do a circumnavigation of it. It's being filmed. They're bringing in scientists, sharing stories from the local cultural leaders, and the whole idea is the documentary that they're making is to elevate those stories and shine a light on the health of our oceans. It's all part of the United Nations Oceans Decade, and it's planned to be the first of an annual expedition swim every year up to 2030.
So, Jim, I want to ask Blow about a little bit about similar to triathlons, open water events. Andy, we've got Andy B and Andy D. So we just go by last names. We've got these endurance events, Andy, that anywhere from the 10K Olympics, approximately 2 hours, all the way up to probably most of our longer swims are in the range of perhaps 10 hours. Okay. You better channel swimmers are 8, 9, 10 hours. I mean, the record's 6:30 something for English Channel. Is that right? Does Grimsey still hold the record?
Yeah, it's a contentious one. A German guy swam it this year, but he was wearing a full body suit. So
okay, but they're in the 6.5 hour range, right? So we're looking at events that are, Andy B, from 2 hours to say 12 hours. and you've got water temperatures that are super cold and you have water temperatures that are super warm. So now how do you approach this from a hydration standpoint?
Yeah, good question. I think when you're at the lower end of that range, like what we know from land-based sports, marathons are really interesting. Well, marathon running, because really good marathon runners run in just over 2 hours. Right. And they're right on the cusp of when fueling is essential, or fueling and hydration are essential for maintaining performance. So back in the day, similar to your incredible story about the Manhattan swim, if you go back into the 70s, Ron Hill running marathons in just under 2:10, he would take a very sort of scientific and massive approach to carb loading, pre-hydration before the event, but basically go close to nil by mouth in a marathon, because the old school way was to prepare, bulk up, as it were, in the final couple of days with carbohydrates, but then rely on just rinsing your stores out during the race. And I think a lot of the perception was that this was to reduce any risk of GI upset or any risk of slowing down because you were trying to ingest something. It's like, we can tough this out and do it, so let's not influence the performance with that. And there wasn't so much of an appreciation for the potential benefits of ingesting something, be it fluids for hydration or carbohydrates.
Yeah,
or
and they
both.
didn't want to take the time to do it.
They didn't want to take the time
down 10 seconds or whatever it may be.
Exactly. So that trade-off at that time was thought to be, don't do it, it'll cost you more than you'll gain. In marathon running today, if we stay on the land, that's kind of shifted in that carb loading still plays a massive part. And I think we should come back to that, because I think that carb loading has a huge part to play in swimming. But you carb load before, but now the top marathon runners are generally taking somewhere between kind of 50, 90 grams of carbohydrate an hour, usually in the form of liquids. They'll take more liquid if it's hotter and they're sweating more, obviously, and then they'll take less, but maybe more concentrated liquid or gels in the cold conditions. So they'll scale it like that. With swimming, it's the big variable is the water temperature. So if you're going for 2 hours in cold water, even in a wetsuit, but particularly if without a wetsuit, your fluid losses through sweating can be very, very low, like not quite zero, but close to it. You're not going to sweat much at all. Whereas if you go into really warm water and you're working hard, and particularly for the triathletes, if you're wearing a wetsuit, your sweat losses can actually be very substantial. So I think hydration specifically for open water swimming, a huge component of it is the water temperature in the wetsuit or non-wetsuit factor. So you can have requirements that are not a lot more than zero through to several hundred milliliters an hour based on the testing that we've done, just depending on that variable. And obviously the other thing is metabolic heat production. The harder you're working, so the fitter you are, like Andy's swimming at, I don't know, like 110 per 100 meter pace or something like that. And obviously that costs a lot of energy and produces a lot of heat. So he's going to sweat more than someone who's not working at as high a percentage of their overall maximum, which is most of the rest of us who are probably working at, he might be working at 80% of his max. We're working at 60% or even less as we get tired. So that metabolic heat production drives whether you're going to sweat or not. So I think there are all these variables. And then the other thing, which you called this sort of I think you said like the switching cost or the cost of stopping. In a marathon, you can run by a table, grab a drink, keep drinking, and yes, you might lose a few seconds, but you don't lose much. In the swim, the logistics of taking a drink or taking something to eat are far more costly in terms of time, unless you're insanely slick and well practiced with that technique, which few people are. I know Andy is, but he's an exception. So for me, there's a further trade-off there, which says, if you're swimming a 2-hour event, you're going to probably err on the side of fueling less frequently and more lightly than might be optimal for a 2-hour event on land, because that slowing down and stopping cost is outweighed over and above. When you get to like 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, and up to this like 8, 9, 10, I think that it's foolish to limit the fueling and the hydration, because what you lose in a few seconds stopping to fuel and hydrate adequately or slowing down, I think you gain that back in maintenance of performance over the long run. And I think that's probably where the biggest change has come in recent years, is that Andy can probably speak in more detail to this, but I know that he was aiming for 100 grams of carbohydrate per hour during some of these big swims. And that is even on land, that's a high amount of carbs per hour. but it's very compatible with what sports science tells us is optimal for maintaining performance.
But do we know yet what? Let's take a marathon run that's 2 hours and it's taking place in 80-degree air temperatures. So that's pretty warm, right?
Yeah.
And let's make it even a little bit more adverse. It's humid too. So it's going to be a high sweat rate, right? And we have enough experience with how to manage that on the run side. On the swim side, and also what's happening as runners are going by at that speed, and also you can have wind that also prevents or contributes a little bit to cooling, right? In swimming, you're in 80-degree water. There is no cooling. You don't have the opportunity for cooling because you're completely surrounded by that temperature constantly. So is there it seems to be that's a differentiator. Apologize, Jim. Seems to be that's a differentiator on something, Andy, that probably needs to be looked at for nutrition, or no?
Yeah, I think so, because I think from a hydration perspective, that's probably the least well understood, that part of it, because the typical way of doing it is to weigh people before and after events. In order to weighing isn't exact proxy for fluid loss, but it's a pretty good estimate. You know, if you lose if I talk in metric for a moment, 1 kilo of body weight loss equates to about 1 liter of water loss. If you do that over multiple hours, those numbers diverge a bit because you burn substrates and you lose respiratory fluids as well. But in general, you get out of a 2-hour swim and you've lost 2 kilos, you've probably lost about 2 liters of sweat. And I think what there hasn't been enough of is we've got case study data from individual swims here and there. We've got a bit of case study data from people swimming in swimming pools, and we know that water temperature is the number one thing that affects how much fluid you lose. But there's a massive inter-individual variability. Like some people, the same as on land, some people just sweat more and some people just sweat less, and that's genetics. You've got then the temperature, the speed, the body size. Water, open ocean water is interesting because very rarely is it homogeneous temperature. There are cold patches, there are warm patches, and there's so many variables and very few
Donaldson can tell you how great it feels when you're in a warm swim and you approach a colder patch. You go, oh, that feels so good at that moment. Or you're in a cold swim and you approach some warmer water.
Yeah. So that, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, like, there's just not enough data being collected in an organized way yet. And I know that the Ultra Swim 33.3 people have started down that journey because they're taking a keen interest in doing some more scientific studies, because they've got a mass of participants doing quite a grueling multi-day event. But because the sections I think the longest section is 10 kilometers, so they're relatively short. So they can do things like weighing some of the participants in that. They can measure some variables, and that will help contribute to the data pool. The other thing is we need some genuine research scientists who've got a keen interest in this to really have the motivation and get the funding to look into it. And that tends to follow. People are studying Ironman athletes and ultra runners a lot more now because there are health and other performance implications for the sport that the commercial companies want to fund research and drive outcomes. And like you've pointed out, Jerry, I think open water swimming, even though it feels bigger to the people that are in it, is still in its infancy commercially, and so it's struggling to attract the kind of attention and funds that would then lead to the research. And again, to sort of congratulate Andy, I think that's one of the things that he's doing very differently to a lot of other competitors, is he's bringing a scientific approach, he's bringing an analytical approach, and he's also raising the profile. So that's all helping to, what I've seen this man's spreadsheets that he generated himself, they're every bit as good as the ones that my team would generate for an elite athlete doing any event. So he's sort of trailblazing in that regard.
Well, let's ask him, Jim, if it's okay to ask AD for a 10K, which will range from 2 to 3 hours, 2 hours for you guys at the leading the pointy end, an hour and 50 something minutes, low 50s, depending on the course and temperature and so on. But let's call it 2 hours to 3 hours for your tailing off participants. Very similar to a regular marathon, right? You'll have some people finishing 4 and 5 hours, but generally you're going to have the bulk of the competitive end 2 to 3 hours. What's the fueling strategy?
So the 10K is the Olympic event. That's the Olympic distance. And what would tend to happen, it depends on the setup of the course. Usually it's in loops in those circumstances, a bit more of a controlled environment. In Paris, obviously, it's going to be, well, hopefully it will be in the River Seine. And what tends to happen, say, for example, it's 2.5 kilometer loops. People will feed every 2.5 Ks. So you're talking about every 30 minutes. This is the faster guys. And it'd be free feeds, usually administered using a feeding stick. So Andy had mentioned one of the challenges with swimming is the delivery of the nutrition. You know, you're not able to run past the table and just grab a bottle, you know. So you've got these coaches that have these feeding sticks leaning out into the water and with a bottle on the end of it, and swimmers will come past, usually on a pond, past the pond.
Jimmy, we should have had an image for this, because these are literally long sticks, and you see all these sticks with a drink at the end of them. So you have sticks that are 8, 10, 12 feet long or longer. And the only way, can you imagine 50 or 60 of these sticks out there? So you try to identify which bottle is yours based on your country's flag, perhaps, or some other distinguishing factor, a balloon. What I mean, everyone's been using different things, right? But so that's the typical way to try to identify.
It's absolute carnage. I mean, if you've got a field of 60 swimmers all descending on this feeding station point, the arms are going, people are getting elbowed in the face. A friend of mine, he had a bloody eye during the Tokyo Olympics.
There you go. There it is. Hang on. There you go. There you go. There you go. You see it? There you go. That's it.
That's it.
It's feeding station. There you go. Yeah, that is chaos right there. I see a red Solo cup. Some guy's drinking a beer.
This has got to be in the Caribbean or in the some warm water place. Everybody's standing in there with, you know, tanks on or shirts on. So
former bass masters, they all of a sudden get a job feeding these open water swimmers.
But you know, so you'd usually have like maybe 200 mils in a bottle, and it's usually in a liquid form, because, you know, if you're swimming along, you grab a power bar or whatever, and you're trying to munch that down. It's slow. It's not getting into your system that quickly. It might sit in your gut. So the easiest thing to ingest is liquid. And, you know, I found in my swims, I was actually putting my energy gels into 200 mils of water and adding a hydration tablet in there, because, you know, in the longer swims, you sometimes lose a bit of dexterity in your fingers, and trying to, you know, I've got one here, trying to open a gel when your fingers, you don't have that movement in them, or if it's in cold water, you lose.
Yes, especially if it's colder. Yes. Yeah.
Get the claw, and it's and, you know, from an environmental perspective, you don't want to be leaving these things in the water. So when these swimmers are doing 10K and they're taking on their drink, the coaches collect, they you know, down their bottle, throw the bottle back to their coach, and keep going. But yeah, times of the essence, you know.
So it's like, not standardized. I mean, it's standardized from the perspective of every 2.5 kilometers. If it's a four loop course, you'll hydrate 3 times to 2.5K, 5K, and 7.5K. You'll see some athletes at the competitive end or the super competitive end skipping the last feeding to get that extra 2 or 3 seconds. And that is a lot. But it seems like it's still, as I've stated earlier, still a wild west as to what each individual has as to the composition of their you know, their intake of fluids, right? So you have your sort of concoction.
I mean, Andy Blow could talk to this, but there doesn't seem to be much methodology or science behind it. It's just what has been done or what coaches feel are the right things to do, and maybe they're not the best people to determine that. But again, the research might not exist yet. So, you know,
yeah.
The precision.
Andy, what was
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to talk over you, Andy. But what I was going to say to that point is we've chatted with a number of sports scientists now who are working with some of the federations in open water swimming, as well as some of the coaches. There's definitely no standardization, but what I would say is the common trend now is that it seems to be most people are using what we wouldn't recommend actually in a lot of land-based sports, which is what we'd call a very hypertonic mixture, which is exactly what you've just described. So everyone's heard of sports drinks being like isotonic, which means essentially they're a similar osmolality to your blood. It means they contain a balance of carbohydrates and electrolytes. And for the more technically minded, it's like around about a 6% carbohydrate solution. So that's what a Gatorade is, for example. 6% carbohydrate and it has a little bit of salt in it. And that's kind of good as a jack of all trades, because if you drink a bottle of that, it gives you a reasonable amount of fluids to replace sweat losses. It gives you a reasonable amount of calories and it gives you a little bit of salts. So it's sort of a one size fits all kind of this will do product. But what we see with the swimmers is they'll tend to use a mix which is way more hypertonic. So in other words, it's thicker and per unit volume, it contains a lot more calories than a normal drink would. So it's more like, a gel mixed in water, or a sports drink where the directions say to you, mix up 2 scoops in 16 ounces and they'll put 6 scoops in and then mix it down, because what they want is a very high, the priority is calories and carbohydrates, and the restricting factor is volume. You can't chug 16 ounces of Gatorade when you stop. So you're trying to condense that, so you effectively reduce the water volume because sweating isn't so much of an issue, and you take a hypertonic solution.
So AB, do you think that, let's bring this, Jim, full circle to triathlon and Ironman races. Should our athletes be ingesting some form of fuel during the swim, the 2.4 mile swim? What are your thoughts?
I'd say
generally that's not the case, and there's no pontoon, AD. No. There's no pontoon like you have in your marathon swims, at least at the 10K races at the moment. What are your thoughts, AB, on this?
I reckon it's rare that you'd need to or want to. I think I wouldn't rule it out. I think for the faster people, anyone who's sub an hour, certainly you're in the zone where you're going to be well carb loaded before that event. We make a strong recommendation to the athletes that we work with to test this in training, but to take a gel or a chew or a concentrated bit of energy drink about 15 minutes before the start, because we know that it takes about 15 minutes to be digested and show up in the bloodstream. So you kind of have that gel. It doesn't actually affect your system until the gun goes off, and then it's being released into the blood and it's ready. And then that takes quite a while to burn through. By the time you're getting out of the water, if you're doing the swim in 55 minutes, you've not gone that deep into your reserves. I think there may be an argument
1 hour
for
and
some
20 minutes to the 1 hour and 45 minute, which is your big fat bell-shaped portion of the curve.
The longer you're out there for, the more likelihood you're going to get some benefit from, say, sticking the gel up the sleeve of your wetsuit or in the neck of your wetsuit, considering taking that in at the halfway point or further on. And that's, I definitely, you proved you swam 28 miles without eating anything. You can swim a long, long way, but is it optimal? And I think there's that point around 90 minutes where the trade-off starts to be, okay, well, if I spend 5, 10, 15 seconds just like pausing, going on my back, taking the gel, stuffing the gel packet back in and swimming, if I feel better towards the end of the swim and kind of get out onto the bike with a clearer head, then that's a net gain for the day, because we know that in an Ironman, it's a race against calories. You can't ingest enough to meet your total demands. And the thing about blood sugar is that if your blood sugar drops, your cognitive function and your mood and things are affected. So if you're someone who gets very hangry and is susceptible to low blood sugar, and you're going to be in the water for an hour and 40, that's a different proposition to Andy, who's going to smash around in 42 minutes and break records.
Jim, what are your thoughts, given that let's go right to Kona. Here's the World Championship this year for men, right? You'll have folks covering the course in an hour 20 to hour 40, and you're in 81 degree water.
Well, that's exactly, in all this discussion, whether open water swimming or triathlon, that one time in this 46 minutes we've been on, or 40, whatever it's been, has anybody said anything but carbohydrates and electrolytes, right? So So am I right in that your performance is driven off of your carbohydrate and your electrolyte intake before, during, and recovery after, as opposed to trying to get in fats and proteins while you're in training or beforehand of racing or training? We're not worried too much about fats and proteins. It's carbohydrates and electrolytes is what we're focusing on. Is that right, Andy? Blow?
Yeah, that's it. And with fluids, the electrolytes are always with fluids. But yeah, that's the three levers: carbs, fluids, salts.
So, and Donaldson, when you go into these long distance swims, you're not worried about having a ham sandwich halfway through, or an Uncrustable, or a payday bar, or and you hear all these different magic tricks all these people have, and I say keep it simple: carbohydrates and electrolytes. Have you always stuck to this, or did you try other things like I said, maybe a Big Mac halfway through a swim or something?
I haven't had a Big Mac in a swim. I have tried a peanut butter sandwich. Again, that was my first ever marathon swim, and it just sat in my gut, and it felt pretty horrible. But there seems to be, from what I gather, there seems to be two schools of thought on protein, and whether you should be taking on protein in the middle of one of these big ultra marathon swims, especially when you're starting to get into the territory of 10 plus hours. Some people feel that the body can't actually process it until you've stopped exercising. Andy Blow, you might be a better person to speak to this subject. I actually did have feeds incorporated into my plan, and it wasn't very often. It was once every sort of 2 hours, which was a protein type drink, and it was quite heavy. It was called Milo. It's quite heavy, sits in the gut. I kind of didn't look forward to it coming every time. I knew it was up next, but I wasn't going to change what I practiced on the day. So,
right.
But no one's forcing you to take it. I did skip it every now and again, but
But if it's your plan, if it's in your execution plan, and that's what you wanted, that's what you forecasted to do before the fact, you kind of want to stick to it. So you believe in what you practice and believe in the way you lay it out there. So being the lead athlete you are, you stick to that. But Blow, do you ever work any type of protein in any triathlete's schedule, or a feeding schedule, or someone like Andy's schedule, or is it all carbs and electrolytes?
Yeah, with triathletes, not currently. I think most of the athletes we're working with are finishing their events inside of the upper end is like 12, 14 hours, really, that kind of zone. So I think that there is some interesting research, and there's some theories about taking some BCAAs, amino acids, proteins in during prolonged exercise, and what that might or might not do. I think that I don't know which way that's going to fall, really, but I don't see it ever being a huge component of what people take in. I think what is fascinating about food and drink and long events, though, are the opportunities for it to provide psychological boost, morale, help with cold temperatures or hot temperatures. As you said with the water, Jerry, there's nothing better than swimming through a cold patch of water when you're hot. Well, there's also nothing better than ingesting a really ice cold drink if it's really hot. With open water swimming, I also know it's absolutely nothing better than having a really hot cup of sugary tea or something like that, or some soup if it's freezing cold. And to Andy's early point and Jim's point about the mental side of long endurance events, I think you can never discount food and drink as a morale booster and as a psychological factor. Like we work with a couple of the world's best Ironman athletes. Jim, you'll know Leon Chevalier, 5th in Nice last year, like up and coming guy, routinely has a Snickers bar on the bike, late in the bike on an Ironman. And he admits it's like, we count the carbs in that and stuff, but that's something to look forward to. That's a morale boost. He's like, He freezes it beforehand and then puts it on his bike and then he'll eat that. So I'm not going to dismiss the physiology, and I think the jury's out a little bit with exactly what people need, but I think the psychological and human factor of like what you choose to eat when you do really, really long events is absolutely critical.
Well, just so you know, that's a leading question because I know we have all of our athletes are listening right now, and I stress carbs and protein. If you want, I mean, carbs and electrolytes. If you want that other stuff, like you said, it's just for your morale, it's the feel good. But our performance, for the most part, is driven on the carbohydrate and the protein intake. And as Donaldson was saying for at the beginning of the discussion, finding that flow state as your blood sugar drops and that nutritional intake starts to wane off. If you're not staying on top of it, it's harder and harder to find that flow state. Am I right, Donaldson? Like you try to get there, but you keep falling off the focus. And I think a lot of times that's just because the calorie intake and electrolyte intake is falling off the table at the time.
Well, we were talking about what happens when you're not getting the glucose or glycogen to your brain. That's when you bonk. And Jerry, you would have experienced that in Manhattan, no doubt. I'm just amazed. I mean, 28.5 miles of pushing through a brick wall, essentially. Like, that's incredible. But I agree with everything that Andy Bowe's actually been saying today. It's just spot on. A lot of it is what can give you that mental boost, and even if there might not be as much science behind it, the placebo effect is certainly something. Those hot feeds, like, nothing compares to that when you get a hot drink in you when you're feeling cold in the water. And you asked at the start of this, Jim, what I think about when I swim. Food's up there.
Yeah.
I think about what's coming next, what I get to eat afterwards.
One of those Aussie meat pies. It's just on the top of your brain the whole time. I got it. I've had them. Delicious. But so you brought up putting all the gels in the bottle, and this is something I've stressed to our athletes for a long time. Rip your gels, put them in a bottle, top it off with water. You keep that on your down tube. You don't have to be ripping gels. It keeps it really easy. In the last, I think it was maybe at Nice, you guys were launching the Carb 60 with electrolytes. And is that kind of your version of putting all the gels in a bottle over precision? Is that what you guys formulated kind of to mimic that?
It's 100% that. It's called the Flow Gel. I'm just trying to find a picture because I've got one on here, which I don't know if this will work if I hold this up, but this is Flow Gel being poured like out. You can see it running into the.
Yeah,
so that's a regular gel, and the one at the background is like the Flow Gel.
Gotcha.
Dripping out into a cup. Yeah. So what we've done with that is we've taken the regular energy gel to the one that Andy's been using, which is a true gel in the sense that we use pectin as part of the process to set the gel. And Andy's actually then taking that and putting some water in with it to make it easier to swallow in one go. The pectin gives it a nice mouthfeel and makes it a bit more digestible, but ultimately it means you can't pour it and drink it. What we've done with the Flow Gel is it's exactly the same gel. It's the same ingredients, but we've changed the cooking process. So we've changed the amount of time it's heated and cooled for so that it doesn't create as many bonds and therefore flows a lot better. It's less viscous.
So what's the official name of that one? That's called the Flow Gel 300. What is that?
Flow Gel, yeah, 300, because it's 300 grams. That's called the 300 just because that size pouch has 300 grams of carbs in it. So Andy hasn't had an opportunity to try it yet because we've only just got these latest batches through, but I'm actually quite excited that the Flow Gel is going to be great for triathletes because you can put it in a drink bottle on your bike and fill a whole bottle and get 300 grams of carbs. But I actually think it's going to be well worth open water swimmers experimenting with because you can just simply pour some of that, a measured amount, into whatever your feeding vessel is. You'll know exactly how much carbs are there. You can either choose to add water or not. Like I'd be adding water and electrolytes if it was very hot and I think I'm sweating, or I'd have it kind of neat if it was cold. And then you can just be metering that out. And, you know, every time you've done a bag of that, that's 3 hours for you, Andy. That'd be 3 hours worth of fuel, you know, one bag and then go again. So, yeah, I think that's the way forward. And it's less waste because you've just got one packet to worry about. It's
yeah, so I tell them it's just easy. You don't have to rip a gel. It's how you're supposed to, you know, on an Ironman, you go through 20 gels, whatever it is. Where do you put it all, right? So if you have something like this, or you're ripping gels, put them in a bottle, you know, you got to make it easy on yourself as well. So another question that was on top of my mind, and you can use Donaldson as an example, but you guys have, you have the 750 for electrolytes, you have your 750, you have your 1000, you have your 1500, right? There's 3 different levels of concentration of electrolytes in the different mixes that you guys provide. What's the downside of every athlete just taking 1,500 every hour? Is there a downside to taking too many electrolytes per hour, or are you just going to sweat it out if you have too many in there?
Yeah, there's a common question, and I would say acutely, athletes are better off taking a little bit more than they need rather than a little bit less. But that's a dangerous thing to say to an athlete, because if Jerry says to an athlete, do a little bit more training, that to some people means let's start doing 3 sessions a day, and
type A, triathletes.
Yeah, I know a few triathletes. So when I say that, what I mean is there's a band of tolerance. The best way to think about this is that with your body, the constant fight that your body is in is to maintain homeostasis, in terms of internal temperature, blood sugar levels, blood electrolyte levels, and countless other things. Like when you exercise, fundamentally you challenge homeostasis because you get hot, so your core temperature needs regulating, you sweat, your body fluid starts to contract, so it has to shift fluid and electrolytes around, your blood, the sugars get burnt up. So this exercise is really challenging on homeostasis. Now, training helps your body to maintain more homeostasis and cope with exercise better, and then the nutritional and hydration inputs also help your body to stay on a level. So really simply, can you take too much carbohydrate or too little carbohydrate when you're exercising? Absolutely. There is a threshold below it's not enough, and there's also a threshold above you can't absorb it and it's too much and you're going to be sick. So there's this kind of Goldilocks sweet spot in the middle, and that amount of carbohydrate is fairly set for different people depending on the intensity that you're working at. The same is true with fluids and electrolytes. I'm a guy like you, Jim. I sweat a lot. I have very salty sweat. I lose loads of salt and loads of fluid. So over the course of an Ironman, I have to take an extraordinary amount of fluid and salt in to stay hydrated. That amount is going to be that one of my colleagues who's just joined the team to work on testing wearable sweat sensors that we're looking at. Ironically, her name's Tash. She's a triathlete as well. She has a really low sweat rate and really low sodium loss. If she drank to my regimen during a race, she would end up puffed up with fluid or being sick or going to the toilet the whole time. So the simple answer is, yeah, you can take too much. There's kind of a band, and that's why we do three different levels. It's like figuring out which level works for you requires a bit of trial and error or some scientific testing or a bit of both. But it's like having a small, medium, large, essentially.
Yeah, Jerry, I think you're muted. Are you there? You got me, Jerry? Yeah, no, and that's like, we do our live workouts every Tuesday and Thursday, and I'll have a puddle underneath me of, probably 3-4 centimeters of sweat. And one of my other athletes who's working just as hard will have 3 drops underneath their bike. So it's totally true, but you got to know your own specific demands. I know when we were in Nice, and this is how thorough you guys are. And like you said earlier, like your company is on top of things. Jerry, these guys wanted me to do a sweat concentration test because they had it set up at their location. And Andy told me about it. And he's like, oh, I'll get you set up. No less than 7 people were calling me and emailing me to get over there and do the sweat concentration test. I never made it because I had a little maniac named Mason trying to, end his own life over there, running off edges and bridges and whatever. But yeah, you have your sweat concentration test. But what's your thoughts on sweat tests and figuring out how much you're losing an hour?
I think if having a sweat concentration test is a great idea if you're taking your sport seriously, but it does require a bit of investment and going to a place to have that done. I think the sweat test that we mentioned earlier, which anyone can do, I'd encourage athletes to do quite frequently, is weigh yourself before and after training sessions, weigh yourself before and after races. If you take into account the amount of fluid you've drunk and what you've eaten during those sessions or races, you can get a really good handle on whether you're someone who loses a little bit of fluid, a moderate amount of fluid, or a lot of fluid. And that's just incredibly useful information. For me, that's everyone writes in their training diaries or records in their training peaks or their Strava, loads of extraneous BS that just doesn't really help them. And they don't record like how much sweat they lost in a session, which is like insanely valuable information if you're trying to build up towards a long event. So I would say there are, and I do fully understand that there are, for some people, weighing yourself frequently and weigh yourself before and after session stuff is not a great thing to do for, people who've had issues with controlling their weight, or some people just want to stay away from that. But if you're cool with knowing what your weight is on a daily basis, then I think it's a really useful investment. Is a decent set of scales. Take them to the pool with you, weigh in, weigh out. After a while, you won't need to do it so frequently because you kind of see the trends. Like, I've been doing this for so many years. I can get on my bike. I can do a session on Zwift or whatever, and I can pretty much predict, based on how I felt and how long the session was, like how much fluid I've lost. And if you can get that knowledge baked into you as an athlete, it's a bit like, Jerry, you'd be able to get in the pool and knock out your 100-meter splits at whatever comfortable rate. You don't need to look at the clock. You'll be within 2 seconds every time. It's like, that's years of doing it. It's the same if you get to know the biology of your body, and sweat is just another factor that I think athletes in general could be better in touch with.
Yeah, and like I said at the start, like, I didn't realize how effective electrolytes could be until I started taking the 1500, and I was getting that amount of sodium into my system per hour, and then my performance at the ripe old age of 44 took off to levels it hadn't seen since early 30s. So I'm 46 now. I'm stronger than I've ever been. It's all because of precision hydration. But you guys have awesome resources on the website too. You have a free fueling plan. There's a ton of different case studies there. So if you guys go to precisionhydration.com, and when you check out, you guys gave us a code Tower26, all capital, no spaces, Tower26. You guys get a discount. All listeners of the podcast here get a discount at the checkout. So we appreciate you guys throwing that in there. Andy Donaldson, we have a couple questions that came in for you from Facebook Live. John Mulcahy wants to know, with all the fluids you're taking in, are you sweating everything out, or do you take a pee while you're swimming? Real highbrow questions we have from Johnny. Do you urinate in the water?
I think I'd explode if I didn't. Well, at least it's in the ocean and it's not in the pool.
Yeah. Wow, you do it. I'm sure you do it in the pool too. Come on. We're not liars here. All right. And then Andy Blow, when you're looking at Donaldson's races that he has coming up, and are you looking at the salinity, how much salt, the salt concentration of the water also when you're thinking about his fueling plan? Or is it just the temperature of the water and how long he's swimming? Do you look at that salt concentration as well?
Yeah, it's a big factor. That's something you obviously inadvertently ingest some salt water, and that's a really common question from swimmers, is that even the best swimmers, you can't help but you are absorbing or taking in some salt, and that's another unknown that no one really knows what effect that's having on the body. We do know though that you benefit from obviously lower salt fluids because of the mouth rinsing effect when you're in really salty open water, and obviously you start to crave more plain water and that kind of thing. And I think if you are doing long swims that are in very salty oceans, then making sure there's plenty of plain water in the rotation of drinks that you've got available is a really good idea. You don't necessarily need to drink a set amount, but you do need to drink enough to make sure that your palate stays refreshed, and otherwise it can lead to a cascade of other problems because you kind of lose touch with what you need and how you feel, and you don't end up taking enough calories, you just spiral down. So yeah, it's a big factor.
Okay, good.
Jump in there as well. With salt water, it changes your body position in the water as well. Swimming in the ocean versus swimming in the lake is two different prospects. This is more so without a wetsuit. So, there's a lot of factors in marathon swimming that impact nutrition. And, just because something is, if we're talking about marathon swims, something like the English Channel, just because it says that it's 20 miles from one point to the other, doesn't mean that you're actually going to swim that far. You might end up swimming a lot further because of the tides and the currents. Jerry, you'll have seen this over the years, all the GPS trackers of people swimming from England to France. It hardly is it ever in a straight line. It's always these big bell curves.
Yeah, that's and that bringing it back to you look at what's his name, Tim Denier. Tim Denier, he runs all the channel swims. You look at some of those maps, and it's just some guys end up going the opposite direction for a little bit, but he'll always post the map, and it's all based on those currents, and it's pretty interesting stuff to watch. Jerry, I think you're muted. I'm not hearing you say anything right now. But But no, we appreciate you guys coming on. We appreciate you guys sharing so much knowledge with us. One last thing that just popped into my mind, if you have an extra second, Donaldson, lake swimming versus ocean swimming. We get this in triathlon all the time. What do you change in your stroke when you go from freshwater into saltwater, being the saltwater is a little more buoyant?
I don't think it's about changing your stroke. It's being aware of where your body position is in the water, and that it might sit higher in the oceans where it's saltier compared to the lake. And, you know, training in both, getting a lot of practice in so that you are aware of those sort of niche differences, I think is going to help. So yeah, I wouldn't be changing too much. Just awareness is a good start, and practice.
Practice. Knowing what to expect in the conditions. All right. So if anybody wanted to get in touch with you,
on that one, have you done Phuket Triathlon in Thailand?
I have not. If you're offering to go there, let's go there. I'm ready.
I would definitely go back. It's an awesome event. But when I did it, I don't know if it's still the same, but it's a really unique setup with the swim, because you start on the beach and you run out into the sea, and the ocean there is insanely salty, super buoyant. You're obviously non-wetsuit. You swim down the coast, and then you come out and you run over a sand dune and you jump into a freshwater lagoon for the last, I think it's about 500 yards or 800 yards or something across. And I've never felt like I've gone from being a good swimmer to a novice swimmer immediately, like what you feel there. And that sort of, and what the weird thing is, obviously, when you just get in a lake and swim, you feel fine. When you just get in the ocean and swim, you feel fine. But never really do you get the chance to kind of go immediately from one to the other. And I thought I was going to drown. I felt like I was swimming like that on the second swim, which just shows you how big a difference that makes.
Yeah, it's just total juxtaposition. Jared, do we have you back? Jared, you're still mute. I still can't hear you, Jared. Yeah, maybe unplug your mic and plug it back in. But no, that's every swim for me. I get halfway through the swim, I feel like I'm a brand new swimmer again. But all right, so if you guys want any more or want to go order your Precision Hydration, go to precisionhydration.com. Use the code TOWER26, all capital, no space, to get your discount. And we'll share another link in the show notes for you guys if you missed that one. But Andy Blow, anything else from you?
No, thank you. Always a pleasure chatting with you, gents. So thanks for the invite.
Well, you're our booking agent now, so you're in charge of bringing people on the show. So, and then Andy Donaldson, go to andy.swimming on Instagram. Where else can people find you and follow your journey as this crazy open water swimmer that you are?
Yeah, that's it, Jim. So Andy.swimming on Instagram, or Andy Donaldson swimmer on Facebook. Be sharing a lot more about what's coming up, including this Epic Swim Maui later in the year.
Yeah, and we will we'll share this audio with you guys, so you could share it to your 118,000 followers on Instagram, Donaldson. That's got to be a record for open water swimmers. No one wants to follow an open water swimmer. Look at you. You're breaking the mold.
Well, that's it. We're trying to, it's a sport that's growing. I think the numbers are out there, especially after COVID. People realizing there's other things in life that they want to do, and new challenges they want to take on, and swimming is one of those sports that's on the up. So I'd love to try raise the profile of the sport any way I can, and contribute. And with guys like Andy Blow and the support of Precision, they're bringing the science to it that can help people as well. So it's amazing. And yeah.
Well, it's great exposing so many people to it, and we're looking forward to many more crazy undertakings in your career. So we're going to follow that, and we'll have you back on. And the next thing you're doing, you can come on and talk about it, and we'll dive deeper into that mindset. So thanks for joining, guys. We appreciate it. We are going to go into the workout of the episode. If you guys want to stick around, you can. But yeah, Jerry and I will just hem and haw about that. So the workout of the episode, you guys can log off. Do you want to stay on? What do you want to do? It's up to you.
I'm going to go and bash one of the children over the head to get
you go
to
do
sleep,
that,
so
Donaldson.
I'm going to sign off.
Beautiful. Donaldson, you want to look at this workout? I think Jerry's still muted, so you can help me through it. You sign off. So what we do, we go to coaching.tower26.com, and we have our workout of the episode. Let me share the screen and I'll go through it. I think Jerry's logging off and he's logging back on, but I will I'm
going to say thanks, Jim, and massive thanks, Andy, for coming on, and I'll see you in Croatia and probably talk to you before then.
Whoa. Croatia. What are we doing in Croatia?
Yeah, if you want to come, Jim, it's swim 33.3.
See, you're throwing all these options out there, and I'm going to take you up on it. I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah.
Told you, Jerry's got the private jet.
We'll get an air mattress. It's all good.
Yeah, I'll sleep anywhere. I'll sleep on the floor, whatever you want me to do. Back seat of a 1987 Cutlass, wherever you want me to sleep, I'll sleep.
Right.
All right, beautiful. Jerry's back.
Guys.
Jerry, say bye to the blow.
Are we back on it? I think between the two of you guys, you need to get that Phuket swim reversed, where you start in the lake and you finish off in the salt water, to make life a little more enjoyable.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, beautiful. All right,
cool.
Well,
right.
go see your kids.
See you later, guys. Thanks a lot.
Donaldson, Donaldson, you stick around. Let me run this workout by you. This is what we do with our open water swim training in the Pacific Palisades down in El Segundo, and in our subscription program at coaching.tower26.com. So we have
nice.
Oh yeah, we have a good a warm up here. Jerry, you want to blow through this real quick? Talk to Donaldson about it.
Warm up and just go right into the sort of the heart of the session, which is mainly a blended session of aerobic endurance and aerobic power, if you want to couch it in those terms, where we have a main set that's, depending on someone's ability level, about a 6-minute effort, approximately, followed by, in this case, 20. This is the main set, Jim, followed by 20 25s. And we do those at 90% of maximum heart rate, which is, your upper aerobic threshold level, with short rest. So it's really aerobic power building. This is about close to 10 minutes of high effort.
Donaldson's here. He's making a comment on it, Jared. What do you got, Andy?
Oh, is that meters or yards? Yeah.
This is in yards, but it doesn't really matter because we're not having, there are no intervals to this. There are no set intervals. There are intervals based on rest, as you can tell. 1 minute after the longer swim, 10 to 15 seconds rest on the short reps. And we'll go through this 3 cycles through. And the second cycle through, we want the longer, the 6-minute effort to be higher aerobically. And then the third cycle through, we want the 6-minute effort to be faster again. But the 25s are staying at absolute right there at you're waffling at your anaerobic line, right? So this is this is quite high intensity while being aerobic.
So Andy, Donaldson, or I guess I'm not saying Donaldson anymore. Andy, when you're doing a workout, getting ready for so go to that. You can go to coaching.tower26.com. We're going to open this up to all you guys. But you're looking at this workout. You go to train for your long course events. Is that a similar workout that you'll do, or do you do more straight swimming? Do you do all open water swimming? What does a typical workout look like for you?
It's mostly pool based, Jim, and what I would say, we're training for ultra marathons that are 20 plus miles, so 30 kilometers and beyond. So having the gears is not as important to, say, someone that is doing a shorter distance, like a 10-kilometer event, the Olympic event. You really need to be able to have the speed as well. So I suppose it all depends on what you're training towards. For us, this long aerobic endurance is incredibly important. I see a lot of guys doing these ultra marathon swims, and they're out there in the ocean swimming, 8 hours at the weekends and the one hitting. And I actually don't do much of that. I think the way that we operate with like my coach, we always take an approach of quality over quantity, and we'd rather work the energy zones and do it in a more concise manner in a 2-hour session. So say 6 2-hour sessions a week. We'd rather be doing that rather than these big, long, drawn-out swims.
Yeah, and that's what Jerry always uses the term low value versus high value workout, right? Go out there, swim 8 hours. Sure, it's good for your aerobic fitness, but I would tend to think that Jerry's going to say that's a low value workout, whereas what you're talking about, 6 2-hour swims a week, where you're working different gears, different effort levels, getting in some various efforts, is a high value workout. Am I right there, Jerry? Still muted. You're not muted anymore. You're back.
About that, Jim, I had some background noise. There's different thought on, we're getting in now to the methodology of training apologize. And so there's a whole, we can dedicate a series of 5 podcasts just to how to train for different distances. So at the moment, I would still call that a low value workout.
Low value workout. I knew it.
And then from a practical perspective, swimming in 8 hours at the weekend, there's your weekend gone. And how do you recover off the back of that? Are you putting yourself at risk of injury? For us here in Australia, swimming 8 hours in the open water or in the river, there's other risks there with sea life. So when you go back to the pool and it's a shorter session, we're working different gears, different energy zones. It's a far more measured environment to we can get the data straight away. We can communicate with our coaches and really be quite specific with what we want to do. And looking at that session there, it looked really, I liked it. Looked quite hard actually.
Yeah, well, you know what? We do that 4 times a week over here in Southern California, and then we send the subscription plan out across the world. So get over here to Southern California, swim with the group, and you're gonna have plenty of those sessions.
I was in Redondo Beach last July for as I was preparing for Catalina. I meant to come along to come in for a swim with you guys. I know the lovely lady I was staying with had spoken very highly of you guys. So
you want to give her a shout out? Do you remember her name or no?
Kathy Gold. So
all right, beautiful.
Yeah,
Kathy,
really
thanks for the good words, Kathy. But yeah, next time you're in town, you're more than welcome to join. So you guys want more of those workouts? Andy Donaldson approved. Go to coaching.tower26.com. We will get you on it. We're going to bypass the questions of the episode, get to them next time. I know Melgard's been sending them in. We kind of been covering them as we've been going. So thanks to Megan Melgard, who's behind the scenes writing all the questions. And she actually sent me the photo of that feeding zone. So thanks to Meg for jumping in on that and helping us produce this show. But Andy Donaldson, go to andy.swimming.com for his Andy.swimming on Instagram. Follow him, be the 119,000th follower. And yeah, we look forward to bigger stuff coming from you week after week, month after month, year after year. Jerry, anything else from you?
All good. It was a good introduction, and there's an entire opening here, Jim, as we can tell. This is the beginning days. This is sort of we're in we're pre-first inning, I think, still regarding hydration and nutrition for marathon swimming. So a lot to do.
It works hand in hand with what most of our listeners in triathlon do. These guys are out there for 8, 9, 10 hours, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 hours for an Ironman. It's like all that stuff works together, and the fueling is going to be pretty similar. So, Andy, you're always welcome back on the show. We like to have you just maybe sit in occasionally, just give some feedback. And thanks for joining, getting up early to be on the show over there.
No, absolute pleasure to be here, guys. Thank you for having me on. Jerry, I will mention I am going over to do Manhattan later this year, so I might be in touch to ask for some advice and your thoughts and what to do, what equally not to do.
Yeah, well, you certainly know what not to do. I would get in touch with your Shelley Taylor, Shelley Taylor Smith. Yeah. So.
All right, guys. Well,
good luck.
For Andy Blow, Andy Donaldson, Megan Mulgard, Jerry Rodriguez, this is Jim Binsky, the Tower 26 Be Race Ready podcast. Thanks for joining, guys.